He will never abandon us. That's his promise. You're right. And thank you. I've been meaning to reply to you because you're right. I think what happens is I start thinking about the Old Testament God. You know how the Old Testament God would withdraw sometimes, and for whatever reason he would withdraw, whether it was judgment or I think he would just get fed up. I guess that's what runs through my head. And the reason I had said that about, many times I worry and I just say, please don't abandon me, God. Just don't let me, don't abandon me is because I was thinking of the Old Testament God. But you're right. In the New Testament, that's no longer the case, right? It's us. It's me. For as long as I've walked with God, it's always me that ends up abandoning God, not the other way around. So, and a lot of the reason I said this is because I should have never got into a debate with the far right Christians about abortion. It is a no-win issue, okay? They won't bend, they don't care, they'll tell themselves they care. They're a brainwashed army that I believe they're the reason why it's advanced to late-term abortion. So let me say why. And I don't agree with late-term abortion just for late-term abortion. But I worked a couple decades ago. I wasn't a nurse. I was a unit secretary at a trauma one hospital right outside of Chicago. And they specialized. They had a NICU unit, and what they specialized in at that hospital, and they still do, is high-risk pregnancies. Okay, so they weren't out just doing abortions. I mean, I worked in the labor and delivery department. So we would get protesters, and this was a full hospital. This wasn't Planned Parenthood. But we would get protesters every now and then, okay? And they would always have to be across the street, and employees parked across the street. So, many times when I would leave work, I have to walk past them. Now, they don't know what floor anybody works on, so they never bothered me. But I would see them on their knees praying, and their big signs of life, life, life. And I worked on that unit, and I thought you have no idea what those mothers are going through. They would fly these mothers in and they would always give them a choice. And back then, when we actually had some ethics in the hospital, they didn't force nurses. Like if nurses weren't comfortable with, because they would do, an abortion at 6 months, but they did it because like the baby had a hole in its heart. The baby wasn't going to make it to full. Like these were women that wanted to have their babies. So when I would leave work and go across the street and see these holy Christians on their knees praying with their big signs, I'm like, you assholes. Like, you have no idea what those... I could just envision what it would be like for those mothers who had every intention of having their baby, and yet then have to walk out and see a bunch of protesters, and yet those same damn radical Christians sit there and say, oh, we care about the mother and the baby. The hell you do. God would have never let this advance to the place it has if they did care. They don't. They don't. I mean, this was a place where it was very strict, the policy. It was very strict. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to do an abortion because of Down syndrome or something. No, these were women that wanted to have their babies. Yet then, something, happens, a hole in the heart, they fly them in. And it just broke my heart because I thought, you're Christians, you're those holy people. So... I don't really fit in the typical Christian box, do I? I mean, most people, when you hear Christian, you think of that far right side, or I don't really fit into any Christian box, but I am. But I sometimes, because of that issue that I shouldn't even debate, because they're a hopeless group, they'll never get to a place where they actually care. They'll tell themselves forever that they care, but there is never going to be an answer to it, because until God comes down and says this is when life begins, they will continue. They don't care that the science says it's not life till 8 weeks after conception. That's not enough for them. It's just a talking point. They've created an army. in America, and everybody thinks that that's the, oh, well, they care about life. No, they don't. I saw it 20 years ago. They didn't. They were really just out there protesting because, like almost the way I took it was you're just wanting to show everybody like that you're some Christian, some holy roller, which then it always brings me back to what the Bible says. God says, pray in your closet. Don't be your holy self out in front of everybody. And yet I would see it. You see it all. They still are doing it today where, I was arrested because I was outside praying in front of an abortion clinic, and your Allie Beth Stuckey's and Michael Knowles and all those people will sit there and say, oh, we have to help this person. And it's like, well, maybe if they got arrested, it's because God figured they should. Because you're not supposed to do that, right? I mean, so I come from a different angle of it, is that, I know that you don't care about the mother because I worked on that unit where it was heartbreaking and crushing to those mothers. They weren't going in just wanting to kill their baby and mutilate it. Not even close. These were women that wanted to have it. They would have to be flown in, or the mother's life was at risk. It was so heartbreaking. So to then see these Christian assholes, it's just like I said, I don't fit into a normal Christian box. But I saw them as cruel, and have ever since then. I see them as cruel because it's like, you don't say you care about the mother and the cells, or life, when you don't, because you don't know what was going on in there. But you didn't care that any mother could have been walking out, having just lost their baby because they find out there's a hole in its heart and they can't go to term with it, or their life is, it's heartbreaking. So I come from it from the actual care angle. And because I'm not in that category with the far right, that's why it sometimes runs through my head, is like, none of us are really ever going to know when life begins. But I certainly wouldn't say that side is about care. So, but thank you, because you're right. And thanks for reminding me. Yeah, he never abandons us.